Desperate to save his little sister, the older brother risked everything by inhaling the blood mist. Yet instead of turning into a monster, he awakened a supreme mutation. By slaying mutated beasts to increase his power, he eventually decided to devour the boss itself to reach new heights of strength. The story traces back to an archaeological team that accidentally broke an ancient seal, triggering a catastrophe that threatened all of humanity. A crimson fog rapidly blanketed the city, driving humans into madness or sudden death, while animals mutated into ferocious beasts that left nothing but ruins in their wake. 3 days prior, the blood mist began appearing globally, and as radio broadcasts urged citizens to stay indoors, Yan Hao was traveling with his family in their car. A military officer urgently knocked on their window and ordered them to move immediately, leaving his mother puzzled by the sudden army presence. While his father remained skeptical of the military's warnings, Yan Hao comforted his terrified younger sister, Xiao Zhu, promising her that the family would stay together. Despite his words, he felt an unsettling tension in the air, wondering what this red mist could be to warrant such a massive military mobilization. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the area, and a car plummeted from above, landing right on top of their vehicle as Yan Hao moved instinctively to shield his sister. After the impact, he checked on his parents only to find his father's leg pinned under the wreckage, just as a thunderous roar drew their attention. A massive mutated beast was laying waste to the military units, prompting Yan Hao's father to shout for everyone to abandon the car immediately. Yan Hao kicked his door open, but his parents were trapped by the crushed roof. Despite his mother's pleas for him to save his sister and run, he refused to leave them behind. As a nearby scream signaled another attack, a beast suddenly slammed down from above, throwing Yan Hao and Xiao Zhu back as it finished off its previous victim. The creature resembled a gargantuan wolf with an exposed spine and a hollowed-out torso, a sight so gruesome that Hao Zhu could only cry out for her parents in terror. The beast turned its gaze toward the two survivors and prepared to pounce, forcing Yan Hao to grab his sister's hand and flee for their lives. As they ran, an apocalyptic landscape unfolded before them, with swarms of colossal monsters filling the darkened skies. Aircraft and helicopters were swatted down and exploded upon impact, while on the ground, other monsters relentlessly hunted the remaining survivors. The mysterious red mist was transforming both humans and animals into bloodthirsty killers, leaving Yan Hao to wonder what had become of the world. The scene shifts to a supermarket where mutated wolves, having caught the scent of the living, began prowling through the aisles toward the hiding siblings. Yan Hao covered his sister's mouth to prevent her from alerting the pack, and only after the monsters moved away did he finally allow himself a moment to breathe. However, his relief was short-lived, as red veins began to spread across Xiao Zhu's face, and she began to groan in agonizing pain. He asked her anxiously what was wrong, to which Xiao Zhu replied that she felt terrible, and looking into the mirror, he realized that similar red veins were appearing on his own skin. Realizing this was the result of the red mist, he quickly soaked a cloth in water and gave it to his sister, telling her to cover her face immediately and stop breathing it in, as the red veins on his face grew more distinct and began to spread. The agonizing pain forced him to the ground as he felt an intense heat, as if something inside his body was trying to break free. And once the pain and veins faded, his sister saw him trembling and asked what was wrong. He fought to suppress his tremors and reassured her that he was fine, but suddenly, a monster spotted them and began to slowly close in. The two siblings were so preoccupied with their pain that they failed to notice the approaching threat, until a hideous face with long, protruding fangs appeared before them. Realizing they had been found, he grabbed Xiao Zhu's hand and fled again, but they had only just managed to escape the supermarket. They were immediately met by an even larger monster lying in wait, and when they turned around, the previous creature had already caught up, leaving them trapped from both sides. Xiao Zhu asked in a panic what they should do, so he pulled her close and told her not to fear because he was there, just as a massive beast roared from the sky above. Other monsters quickly surrounded the pair, and it was clear that this was the most formidable creature they had encountered since their flight began. He wondered if their journey would end there, but fortunately, he spotted a potential escape route through the surrounding circle of monsters. Without a second thought, he pulled his sister toward the opening, but unfortunately, another monster was already waiting for them inside. Since the situation outside was even more dangerous, he decided their only choice was to fight and grabbed a wooden beam to face the creature. However, his resistance was as futile as a grasshopper trying to stop a carriage, as the monster's powerful jaws instantly splintered the wood into pieces. It lunged at him with its jaws wide to swallow him whole, and though he managed to hold it back with his limbs, the force of the attack threw him violently against the wall. Just then, an arrow struck the monster and blinded one of its eyes, as Xiao Zhu had used her bow to save him, enraging the beast that a mere prey had managed to wound it. The furious monster immediately turned its sights on Xiao Zhu, prompting him to scream for her to run without looking back as she dropped her crossbow and fled at full speed. Red veins suddenly flared up and spread across his entire body, causing him to writhe in pain and cough up blood while he watched his sister run for her life. He struggled to hold onto the wall to keep from collapsing and cried out in despair, wondering why this was happening now. But his rage exploded when he saw the beast about to strike his sister. His hands clenched so tightly that the concrete wall crumbled, and a surge of power flung the wall onto the monster, making it howl in pain as his eyes turned blood red and he seized an iron bar. He roared for the creature to die as he drove the iron bar through its skull, blood spraying everywhere. And with every scream, he plunged the metal deeper, inflicting more fatal wounds. Xiao Zhu watched her brother in horror as he acted like a wild beast, rushing to embrace him tightly while pleading for him to stop and insisting she was all right. Her voice echoed in his mind and pulled him back to reality as he recalled his parents' final words, urging Xiao how to take good care of Xiao Zhu. He gazed at his sister with tears streaming down his face and a heavy heart, apologizing for worrying her and claiming he was fine just before another beast lunged at them. Its massive maw, as large as a truck, opened wide to swallow them both. But he grabbed Xiao Zhu and rolled aside just in time as the creature pivoted to attack again. He gripped his staff and roared at the wretched creature to stay away from his sister before swinging with such force that it was sent flying into a wall. Amidst the rising dust, he turned to Xiao Zhu and firmly told her to hide while he lured the creature away, though she clung to him, trembling with fear that he might lose control again. He gently stroked her head, reassuring her that he would remain in control this time and promising to return for her very soon. Xiao Zhu nodded with complete trust in her eyes, promising to wait for him, just as a crimson energy began to emanate from the shadows, catching his attention. He muttered that absorbing this energy might make him stronger, then pointed his finger at the beast leader and challenged it, claiming that once he defeated it, he would finally have the strength to protect his loved ones, and told the beast it could die in peace, though the leader only sneered as its minions charged forward. He struck down his enemies one by one until a beast bit his shoulder, causing the red patterns on his arm to glow as he grabbed the creature and tore it in two. His hands transformed, becoming as sturdy and sharp as those of a beast king, leading him to marvel at this incredible new power before the leader's roar echoed out. The minions retreated instantly as he looked up to see a heavy fighter jet overhead. Snapping out of his power-induced trance, he stared at his strange hands and wondered what was happening to him. A bomb fell, creating a blinding light as he screamed for Xiao Zhu to stay back, followed by a deafening explosion and thick dust as a military helicopter touched down. Realizing he was infected, they decided to abandon him and only take Xiao Zhu, leaving him to watch helplessly in exhaustion as his sister was flown away before he lost consciousness. Half a year later, he was still haunted by nightmares of Xiao Zhu being consumed by flames, causing him to wake up gasping for air. He sighed at the recurring dream and wondered where Xiao Zhu could be before picking up his gun to continue his search, thankful he hadn't been discovered yet. Since the day Xiao Zhu was taken, he had scoured every refugee camp in vain, as his sister had vanished without a trace, leading him to join the border patrol to find her. He became a low-ranking B-class soldier, because only the military possessed the means to gather information and travel freely, and he was currently stationed at the Akishi border post. The blood-red mist still blanketed the entire city as if nothing had changed, and he ran toward a soldier named Captain Gu Jun to apologize for arriving late for his shift. With a weary sigh, the captain looked at the useless rookie again and promptly kicked him in the rear. "Where have you been slacking off, you idiot? How long have you been late for your shift?" Fearing another blow, he scrambled up to the watchtower, though the captain remained troubled by the recruit's lack of discipline. He didn't forget to issue a warning. "Yan Hao, some high-ranking officials are arriving soon, and only then can we rest. If you cause any more trouble, I'll deal with you personally." Acknowledging the order, he stood atop the watchtower and gazed down at the ruins of the once thriving city, unable to stop himself from reflecting on the past. 6 months ago, when the red mist began to spread, most cities were reduced to rubble and became habitats for mutated creatures. Along with the red mist, a mysterious tower appeared, forcing survivors to band together and flee as far from the tower and the mist as possible. He thought of his old enemy, the one who had torn his brothers apart. He wondered if the man was still alive, but vowed that he would eventually find him. Elsewhere, the captain lit a cigarette and chatted with his comrades, noting that the special forces were already handling things beyond the border. Our guard duty is just a formality. If even the special forces were to fail, what could mere patrolmen like us possibly do? Hearing this, his two teammates sighed, reasoning that since they were a renowned special forces unit, there was no way they could be defeated. Exactly, Captain. Are you trying to scare us? Their group didn't come here for a mission, but to slaughter mutated beasts as they please. Meanwhile, Yan Hao stood guard alone, staring into the red mist and thinking to himself how much he still loathed its scent after all this time. This substance would trigger the most primal bloodlust in creatures, causing them to attack one another. Suddenly, the red mist began to dissipate visibly, signaling that something was approaching. One of the team members spoke up. "Captain, something is happening. Look over there, what's going on?" causing the captain to suddenly stand up. "This isn't right. When did the red mist reach here?" he wondered, as two special forces officers emerged from the haze, running toward them in a panic. The captain asked what was happening, but the two officers had no time to explain, only managing to shout for a retreat before something swung out from the mist and sent them flying. Faced with a threat that could take down two officers in a single blow, the commander radioed for everyone to withdraw, yet the captain was unable to escape in time. A mutated beast's claw seized him by the collar and yanked him back, cold sweat pouring down his face as he realized his life was about to end. Turning his head, he saw a massive mutated lizard bringing him close to its face, its blood-red eyes inspecting whether its prey would be a tasty meal. In that moment, the captain could only cry out that his life was over, while Yan Hao looked down from his high vantage point, hearing the desperate screams of the others. "Help me, they've arrived! Run!" they cried, but without hesitation, he leaped down to engage the mutated beasts, and with a loud crash, several monsters were instantly dispatched. Yan Hao activated his mutated hands, his eyes glowing like fire as he muttered unintelligible words, while a nearby beast watched its kin being slaughtered. It growled in fury, baring its sharp fangs threateningly before lunging at Yan Hao with terrifying speed, yet he remained completely unfazed. With a lightning-fast motion, he seized the monster's head and delivered a powerful blow that sent its skull flying into the distance. A surge of red energy emanated from the corpse and was quickly absorbed into his mutated arm, filling his body with newfound strength. Yan Hao smirked, noting his power had increased significantly, and wondered how strong he would become if he absorbed all the surrounding beasts as he scanned the area. He counted the monsters surrounding him, 3, 4, 5, 6, but quickly lost patience and channeled his internal energy, letting it flow through his entire body. "Don't disappoint me," he muttered as a destructive bolt tore through the beasts, causing them to collapse before they could even realize what was happening. Yan Hao turned his head, his gaze sharp and alert, realizing someone had come to steal his prey. It was Song-Er. She was the captain of the Outer Operations team, a beautiful young woman with platinum hair who had arrived with her Special Forces unit. Yan Hao thought he was doomed and needed to retract his mutated arm immediately as Song-Er decisively ordered the extermination of every beast. The team immediately aimed their weapons at Yan Hao, leaving him no time to explain, so he simply raised his hands in surrender and shouted for them not to fire. He tried to explain he was just a low-ranking soldier from the border patrol, but the sound of gunfire erupted before he could finish his sentence. In an instant, the beast attempting to attack him from behind collapsed, its body riddled with bullets, leaving Yan Hao standing there in total shock for several seconds. Once the special forces announced the target was neutralized, he regained his senses and realized they had only been targeting the monster behind him. Light footsteps approached Yan Hao as Song-Er stood before him, holding a rifle and fixing him with a stern, serious gaze. "Where is your weapon, low-ranking patrol soldier?" Her sharp question left Yan Hao flustered and unable to come up with a justification. As he remained silent, thinking he was in trouble, a Special Forces member announced a full retreat to the temporary defense line, and the scene shifted to a military tent. A stern guard informed those in the truck that no unauthorized personnel could enter without Captain Song's permission while inside. Song-Er reviewed the recent casualty reports. Special Zone A suffered 37 casualties, including 2 Special Forces members and 30 Border Patrol soldiers, with the rest still missing. After hearing the personnel damage report, Yan Hao nodded in agreement, but then asked why he was being detained since he was also a victim of the incident. He was bound tightly to a chair while 2 special agents stood stiffly beside Song-Er as she continued the interrogation, noting he had left his squad for over 2 hours the previous evening. Upon his return, the Red Mist riot broke out, and she demanded an explanation. Yet Yan Hao felt fortunate that his mutated hands had not yet been discovered. At the same time, he could not admit to oversleeping during his shift, so he stammered that he had only closed his eyes for a moment amidst the ruins. He claimed to have informed his captain and wondered why it wasn't recorded, but a nearby officer raised his hand to report that the boy was frequently late for work. The captain always shielded him, and while he didn't want his comrade framed, Yan Hao felt uneasy as his secret nap was nearly exposed, his eyes turning bloodshot. He cursed the man internally, vowing to castrate him if he kept talking, while Song-er frowned at the border patrol's unresolved issues as the mentioned captain suddenly sneezed. An officer asked the captain if he was all right, and the doctor reassured them that all test results showed his body was perfectly normal. Another soldier questioned how this could be considered normal, suggesting that the captain simply needed to have his mouth bandaged shut. Back at Yan Hao's current location, Song-er held his file and continued the interrogation, noting he had only finished basic training 3 months ago. Song-er spoke with suspicion, remarking how surprising it was that he survived the disaster when even her Special Forces squad had lost 2 members in the recent battle. Yan Hao immediately countered that he was afraid to die, explaining that his background in track and field made him more agile than others when the red mist shifted. He claimed he ran before the monsters arrived, but Song-er questioned why someone afraid of death would join the military unless they had another motive. The question silenced Yan Hao, who actually sought his sister Xiao Zhu. For 6 months, he had lived like a lone wolf, hunting low-level beasts to control his mutation. He had used every means to find clues about human shelters, yet as a soldier, he feared death, abandoned his post, and failed to report the anomaly. Song-er approached Yan Hao, asking if he understood the consequences, to which he coldly asked if she would execute him before she whispered, asking about his hands and his lies. She demanded to know his true reason for joining the army, while Yan Hao remained expressionless, realizing she had indeed seen the truth. Suddenly, a violent tremor struck. While Song-er dismissed it as a common earthquake, Yan Hao recognized the familiar sensation of a massive horde of monsters approaching. He immediately turned to flee and shouted for her to run, but Song-er suspected he was merely seizing a chance to escape as a spark of electricity flashed in her eyes. In an instant, she pinned him to the ground, asking if he dared to ignore her by fleeing, just as the earth beneath their feet began to crack open. Those nearby pleaded in a panic for the commander to go easy as the ground shattered, but she snapped back that she wasn't using that much strength. At that moment, the ground beneath them shattered, and screams erupted everywhere. After the fall, a thick shroud of dust covered the area, leaving many in a state of lingering panic. Yan Hao calmly asked if they had fallen underground, while Song-er remained composed and ordered everyone to turn on their lights to assess the situation. Meanwhile, the officer, the captain's brother, still held a prejudice against Yan Hao, calling him a jinx and claiming that nothing good ever happened when he was around. When asked if the entire group would be stuck underground forever, Yan Hao lazily replied that they should focus on surviving and getting back to the surface before they start crying. It wasn't certain they would spend their lives there, but as the lights illuminated the area, the group saw massive, overlapping caverns, leading someone to wonder if they were tunnels dug by exotic beasts. Someone cried out. Song-er immediately commanded them to stay calm, check their remaining weapons, and maintain their formation without leaving any openings. A strange breeze suddenly blew past, and Yan Hao, with his sharp instincts, sensed danger and warned them of the wind, which the sentry heard. The sentry noted that wind meant there was an exit and suggested they investigate after confirming a light breeze was indeed blowing. The guard was so overjoyed that he failed to notice 3 crimson eyes staring intently at him, yet he still didn't miss the chance to mock Yan Hao. He told Yan Hao he was talentless and only good at running away, calling him a master of fleeing, just as a 3-eyed monster suddenly lunged from behind the officer while he was announcing the escape route. In an instant, the beast was struck down by a bolt of lightning, and its green blood splattered down, nearly hitting a man in his most sensitive area. Song-er immediately warned that the armored beetle's blood was highly corrosive and told them not to touch it or act without her orders. Seeing the ground corrode before him, the man thanked heaven he hadn't been castrated, while Song-er glanced at Yan Hao and noted his keen intuition for avoiding danger. She told him he would have to explain himself once they were safe, but Yan Hao simply looked at her in silence, wondering to himself. He questioned what her intentions were if she already knew his secret but hadn't revealed it, just as the sound of beastly roars grew increasingly louder, signaling an approaching terror. Hundreds of 3-eyed armored beetles emerged from the caves with ferocious expressions, and in a flash, thousands of surrounding tunnels were blocked by these exotic beasts, prompting someone to curse at the overwhelming number of beetles and realize they were in deep trouble. The bad news was that the beasts gave them no respite, swarming in to tear at their prey in such numbers that all resistance resistance seemed futile, until they fortunately found a cave the beetles hadn't invaded. Everyone immediately carved a bloody path to escape inside, but once they entered the cavern, Yan Hao suddenly sensed something strange. Despite Song Er's urging for him not to stop and to keep running, he turned back and noticed that the swarm of beasts seemed to have stopped their advance. Although the reason for their lack of pursuit remained a mystery, the entire team had to press onward in search of an exit, and after traveling a short distance, they encountered an overlord-class exotic beast that was absorbing the red mist to bolster its strength, its fanged maw hanging wide open. A dark energy source was coalescing inside it, which Yan Hao immediately noticed, warning everyone to be wary of the power emanating from its mouth, as Song Er seized the moment to raise her weapon and fire at the creature. Nevertheless, the monster had also finished gathering its energy and unleashed a crimson blast, with the two opposing forces passing each other without colliding. Consequently, the Overlord was struck by Song Er's shot, while she narrowly avoided its counterattack thanks to Yan Hao timely transforming his arm to block the blow, prompting her to stare at his altered limb in confusion. "Yan Hao, your arm," she began, but he cut her off, stating that he would explain everything once they had reached safety. Yan Hao advanced toward the Overlord, prepared for a major confrontation, while Song Er noticed her own attack had only left a minor scratch on its head. Song Er thought anxiously that if her best shot barely grazed its skin, she wondered if he could truly defeat this monster, leaving her with nothing to do but cheer him on from the rear. "Yan Hao, be careful," she cried, and bolstered by her encouragement, he charged at the boss, though he quickly realized that his strikes were not as effective as he hoped. He failed to inflict significant damage on the creature, because its armor was so thick that any ordinary beast would have been shredded, its massive size and solid defense making it resemble an armored tank. It had undoubtedly devoured many of its own kind to achieve such terrifying power and stature, and as the beast began its counteroffensive, it threw a punch at Yan Hao that failed to connect. He pondered that it seemed to have funneled all its strength into its defensive plating, leading him to chuckle and sigh that it was nothing more than a giant, mobile sandbag before he acted. He plunged into a relentless battle with the exotic beast, leaving the rest of the group stunned as they wondered if they were dreaming, seeing that Yan Hao, the boy who feared death the most, was fighting so fiercely. The one who was always the first to flee was now confronting an Overlord-class beast single-handedly, making them question who he truly was. Song Er immediately spoke up to explain that he was a test subject engineered to combat exotic beasts, a secret project researched by the United Government. They questioned how someone who took 3 months just to pass basic training could be an anti-beast experiment, but she confirmed his identity after he had shielded her from the attack. However, these explanations only satisfied the naive younger members, while the deputy officer standing nearby could not help but feel skeptical of his commander's words. He wondered if the United Government truly possessed such test subjects, or if she was hiding something. As Song Er continued her persuasive story about how he had escaped the lab to infiltrate the border patrol, she claimed the previous red mist outbreak was likely linked to him, which was why she had suspected his identity, emphasizing that this was a matter of supreme national security. She warned that everything heard and seen here must never be disclosed, and upon hearing this, the officer had no choice but to comply, acknowledging her command. Returning to the battlefield where Yan Hao fought the Overlord-tier beast, the monster once again gathered energy in its maw and unleashed a devastating attack. Yan Hao dodged with ease but forgot his comrades were positioned behind him. After a thunderous explosion, Captain Song Er's quick reflexes saved her, but the officer was not so fortunate. He was saved by the deputy commander, but lost a leg in the process, causing the trembling officer to stammer, asking why such a powerful warrior would sacrifice himself for a lowly soldier. The deputy commander calmly replied that trading a leg for a life was a fair deal, yet the officer continued, questioning if his primary duty wasn't to fight the beasts. Now that his precious strength was lost for his sake, the deputy commander offered comfort, stating he joined the military not just to slay monsters but to protect. As the shield of humanity, he refused to abandon anyone, leaving the officer stunned by his sincerity while Yan Hao, now at a disadvantage, was sent flying dozens of meters away. With his energy nearly depleted and his arm mutation failing, he stared at the massive creature and realized the overwhelming difficulty of facing an Overlord-tier beast. In that critical moment, as the monster swung a heavy blow at him, a bolt of lightning struck its head, forcing the creature to retreat in agony. Noticing the residual electricity, he realized Song Er had intervened and turned to see her standing there with a rifle in her hands. Powerful electrical currents still swirled around her, as she told Yan Hao he couldn't die yet because she had many questions he needed to answer. Suddenly, the monster struck by Song let out a bizarre laugh, baring its terrifying fangs while exhaling plumes of hot, humid mist. Song felt a surge of dread as red mist from every corner of the cavern began to converge upon the overlord beast. These interconnected caves allowed the creature to easily manipulate the red mist, using it as a source to regenerate its strength. Watching the wound on the monster's head heal, Song grew anxious, knowing it would soon return to its peak condition if this continued. Realizing the previous red mist outbreak was its doing, she rushed to Yan Hao and told him they couldn't defeat the creature immediately. She urged him to retreat while it was recovering, but Yan Hao refused to give up, standing once more to activate his arm mutation and declaring the beast must die today. He explained that the summoned mist also replenished his own power and that the monster was currently immobile while absorbing energy, claiming this was their best chance to strike. He ignored Song warning about the risk of death and assumed a fighting stance as red energy radiated from him. He remarked that he had walked through the gates of hell many times before, leaving Song with no choice but to follow his lead. She agreed to the plan, but warned there was only one shot, kneeling down to aim her rifle as intense lightning energy concentrated at the tip of the barrel. "I'll release my full power to help you shatter its head armor. Take this opportunity to destroy its brain directly." She peered through the scope, aiming at the beast's head for her strongest shot, knowing it was their only hope, then pulled the trigger. At that moment, Yan Hao lunged forward, following the lightning bolt fired by Song as he leaped onto the monster's head. The lightning struck the monster's crown, shattering its armor, and Yan Hao seized the moment, thrusting his mutated arm directly into its head. He unleashed 7,749 punches upon the monster's exposed head, causing a torrent of green fluid to gush out and splatter everywhere. The monster shrieked in agony as its head armor cracked further, while Song watched from behind, stunned by the brutality of his assault. Did we succeed? An explosion erupted amidst the green spray, blasting Yan Hao back as his mutated arm vanished from overexertion. He plummeted to the ground, and Song rushed over in a panic, but Yan Hao lay unconscious and motionless after the blast. Song noticed a photo that had fallen from him and picked it up curiously, unaware that a core was slowly merging into his palm. As a faint red mist drifted, the core's intrusion triggered a violent reaction in his body, causing his veins to bulge in resistance. He awoke in a void where genetic codes drifted around him, seeing nothing but red mist and strange, shifting sequences. "Am I dead?" he wondered as he watched a segment of what looked like genetic code pulsing with a pink light. Suddenly, he realized a core was merging into his chest, and as he stared at it, the memory of it came rushing back. Isn't this the energy crystal from inside that Overlord-class beast? It was just in my hand a moment ago. Why is it in my chest now? It's emitting a strange energy and absorbing the surrounding red mist. What? It's actually consuming the mist. Not only that, but it can also store the mist, allowing me to undergo even more powerful mutations than before. I no longer have to fear losing control, but then a corner of the core cracked, revealing a grim reality. This is bad. The crystal has reached its storage limit, yet the red mist continues to pour in, sparking a sudden realization as he looks around. It's dangerous to let this continue. It will explode if it doesn't stop. Suddenly, he remembered something and raised his hands to his chest. That Overlord-class monster's technique consumed massive amounts of red mist. If I can absorb it, I should be able to discharge it too. Returning to the present, inside the hospital's intensive care unit, he lay on his bed as streaks of red mist emanated from his body before he finally woke up. With eyes glowing like a burning fire, he sat up abruptly and concentrated all the energy he had absorbed from the crystal core into his arm. A thought flashed in his mind that he must focus because failure meant certain death. Just as the door opened and Song walked in to visit, only to be startled when she saw him about to discharge a powerful blast of energy toward her. Rewinding to a few minutes prior at the hospital, a guard stood at attention and saluted Song asking about the condition of the adjutant's leg. Standing before the adjutant's clinic door, Song replied that as a soldier, he was already prepared for such outcomes, so the guard shouldn't blame himself too much. She entered the room where the adjutant was holding documents regarding Yan Hao, and he looked at Song asking what exactly was going on with Yan Hao. He questioned why he had never heard of the SU having a test subject like him. So Song picked up the clipboard and replied that Yan Hao's case was top secret. She told him to focus on recovering and not to worry, then turned to leave while mentioning she had requested headquarters to transfer him to the logistics department. She advised him to rest well from now on, but as she prepared to exit, the adjutant spoke up, saying he would report the truth to her father, Chief of Staff Song Lion. He claimed the man would make his own judgment, which infuriated Song-er, who shouted in his face, asking if he still remembered who his superior was. She announced that his communication rights were now suspended and ordered him to stay put and go nowhere. And after she finished dealing with him, Song-er and the guard headed toward Yan Hao's hospital room, stopping at door 314, where the guard announced their arrival, prompting a worried Song-er to issue a command. She ordered him to stand guard outside and let no one enter without her permission. And after the guard saluted, she opened the door to a terrifying sight. Yan Hao was concentrating energy to fire at her, and when Song-er asked what he was doing, he had no time to explain and simply shouted for her to get out of the way. A surge of energy erupted, triggering a violent explosion that knocked Yan Hao backward from the recoil while Song-er quickly dove for cover. The energy sphere obliterated the door, sending the panicked guard to the ground, before piercing through the wall with an earth-shattering blast. A crimson mist-like glow followed as the sphere flew out of the hospital, leveling several abandoned buildings across the street, while the vice commander watched, wondering if Yan Hao was responsible. He wondered how long Captain Song-er could keep this a secret, while the guard remained huddled on the ground, trembling and lamenting his terrible luck. Terrified and fearing for his life, the guard cowered as Song-er stared at the holes in shock, recognizing the technique used by the Overlord-class beetle from their previous encounter. She wondered how Yan Hao could wield beast abilities without transforming his arm, then turned to him and remarked that he owed her a thorough explanation. On the hospital rooftop, Song-er and Yan Hao stood across from each other as their conversation deepened, and after hearing his story, she crossed her arms with a curious gaze. She asked with a tone of serious inquiry if it was true that he could not only absorb beast cores, but also replicate their powers through them. Yan Hao nodded and gestured to explain that he could also absorb and store the red mist, noting that the core even seemed capable of self-regeneration. Seeing his honesty, Song-er smiled slightly and rested her hand on her chin, noting how versatile his abilities were as Yan Hao's voice grew somber. He admitted that while he gained their strength, he also faced the risk of losing himself and fully transforming into a beast, then looked into her eyes as she voiced her concern. He asked if he was still human or if she saw him as a monster, to which Song-er immediately replied that he was a unique existence and that his nature depended entirely on how he chose to use his power, before stepping closer to tell him that his strength was both a curse and a weapon, offering him two choices. He could either join the Blood Soldiers as a reserve under her command, or be hunted down and purged as a potential threat and a beast. Yan Hao was taken aback by the word purged, but Song-er nodded gravely, asking him to consider if anyone in the city could truly match his current power. She pointed out that while she could not stop him now, he still lacked the strength to oppose Su, so joining her team would be his best option for support. She promised to assist him to the best of her ability, but despite Song-er's sincerity, Yan Hao remained skeptical as he stroked his chin. "I'm a dangerous person you've only known for a few days, and my power could spiral out of control at any moment. Are you truly willing to take in a troublemaker like me? The price you paid must not have been small. You're putting in all this effort just to recruit a new soldier. Is there some other motive?" Song-er looked at him. Her eyes were filled with determination. "You're very clever. For a certain reason, I truly need you, but you must believe that we are not enemies." She held a photograph in her hand. Holding it up in front of Yan Hao, she said, "Perhaps you can view this as a business transaction." Seeing the photo, Yan Hao was startled and reached for his pocket. "What? Why do you have my photo?" Song-er smiled, her tone brimming with confidence. "Don't underestimate me. If I want to investigate your past, it's as easy as turning over my hand. If you join the Blood Guard, I will use our highest-level intelligence network to help you find your sister in this photo." Given Song-er's terms, Yan Hao felt this was a good option. Searching blindly on his own had its limits. Just as she said, having a higher status and rank would make everything easier. He decided to agree and reached out to take the photo back. "It's a deal." Then he gave a cryptic smile and scratched his head. "But Captain, if you need me that much, a little extra salary shouldn't be a problem, right? After all, I spent all my previous wages looking for my sister." Song-er was satisfied that she had succeeded, but she didn't forget to bring this new recruit in line. "Corporal Yan Hao, as the captain of the Blood Guard, I hereby approve your appointment as a Blood Guard reserve soldier with the highest salary grade. Now, go complete the paperwork immediately." Yan Hao remembered the holes he had just blasted into the building. He immediately planned his escape. Running to the door, he gave a sharp salute. "Understood, Captain Song. I'll get the paperwork done right away." But Song-er called him back. "Oh, by the way, I've already advanced the payment for the damages you caused. I'm not in a rush for it now, but it will be deducted from your future salary." Hearing that he was about to lose money, Yan Hao dejectedly scratched his head and walked away. "I still have to pay for it after all." Song-er watched him leave, her thoughts drifting back to her uncle. "Uncle, I will definitely find a way to save you. I feel that he holds the key to turning mutated beasts back into humans. In Kishi City, a military vehicle pulled up to the patrol team's headquarters. Yan Hao and the guard got out to register, and Yan Hao asked curiously, "Are you joining the special task force too?" It was only then that Yan Hao finally got a clear look at the guard's face. He pointed confidently at his chest and said with pride, "Captain Song and the adjutant both think highly of me. Even though I'm joining the logistics department, Yan Hao, we can support each other in the future." His friendly attitude reminded Yan Hao of their time serving together in the border guard. However, Yan Hao didn't care in the slightest about those he considered mere subordinates. He wondered, what was this guy's name again? He probably hadn't paid enough attention to remember. The guard waved behind Yan Hao and said, "There's Captain Gu. He's doing all right." Yan Hao turned around to see a group of city defense guards surrounding Captain Gu. The blonde man was still covered in wounds, his limbs wrapped in bandages. Following the red mist outbreak, he had to walk with a limp using a cane. Standing before him was an old friend who was also an old enemy. Zhang Shui currently serves as the captain of the Kaishi City defense team. "Years ago, you snubbed me because of that mute woman, old Gu." Zhang Shui mockingly shoved Captain Gu against the wall, sneering that he now resembled a masterless dog coming to beg the defense team for help. "You here for your team's compensation." Witnessing this, a subordinate guard lost his temper and charged at the city defense squad. However, his strength was insufficient, and two men quickly pinned him to the dirt. They mocked him for trying to fight alone with only his mouth. He screamed for the bastard to release Captain Gu, but Zhang Shui merely spat in contempt and ordered him to kneel and lick the mud off his boots. Otherwise, he sneered while pointing at the guard. He would snap the boy's arm and turn him into a useless burden for the captain. Caught in a desperate dilemma, a furious Captain Gu prepared to kneel, but Ren Hao stepped in to stop him, lifting him up and saying there was no need. Captain Gu looked up in shock, amazed that the lazy recruit he once shielded was now standing tall against a crowd of enemies to protect him. Deeply moved, he called out Ren Hao's name, but the youth simply smiled and said it was time to repay the many favors he had received before turning to the squad. He declared loudly that as long as Ren Hao was there, anyone who touched a hair on Captain Gu would have their bones crushed and fed to the dogs. Enraged that a mere youth dared to threaten the entire city defense team, the men charged forward, determined to teach Ren Hao a lethal lesson. They screamed, asking if he had a death wish, but Ren Hao remained unfazed as he stepped forward to drop one man with a kick and another with a punch. Within seconds, 4 defense members were sprawled on the ground, each defeated by a single strike, leaving the onlookers stunned by his overwhelming power. One of the defense members shouted that their captain was an E-rank warrior, and that Ren Hao was doomed for daring to raise a hand against them. Zhang Shui stared at his 4 fallen subordinates in speechless horror, wondering how the boy could be strong enough to take down 4 men in 4 seconds. Realizing the boy was faster and stronger than himself, Zhang Shui decided he couldn't win a fistfight and drew his firearm to aim at Ren Hao. He threatened to kill the border patrol trash for resisting authority, but Ren Hao dodged the bullets with a smirk, mocking his pathetic aim and speed. He lunged forward and seized the weapon, telling Zhang Shui his firing speed was far too slow before crushing the metal gun with his bare hand. As Zhang Shui stood frozen in terror, Ren Hao released the shattered fragments of the gun, which fell to the ground amidst a trail of rising smoke. Remarking that this was barely 1% of Song Er's strength, he left Zhang Shui feeling utterly humiliated in front of his own men and the crowd. He drew his knife and lunged at Yan Hao, but Yan Hao didn't even bother to dodge the weak and sluggish attack, simply catching the man's arm with one hand, tossing the blade aside, and lifting him off the ground by his throat. "Did you just say you wanted Captain Gu to kneel and lick your feet?" Yan Hao asked, as Zhang Shui finally realized he was utterly powerless against him. He could only rely on his commander's reputation to try and intimidate him, stammering out a warning for Yan Hao not to do anything reckless. Before he could finish his sentence, Yan Hao's gaze turned icy as he ignored the threats and slammed the man's head into the ground with such force that the earth shattered, leaving Zhang Shui unconscious and foaming at the mouth. Once it was over, the remaining onlookers fled in a panic, terrified of the man who could dodge bullets and crush a gun with his bare hands. Yan Hao ignored the security lackeys and simply brushed off his hands as if he had touched something filthy. Noticing a flicker of red energy on his arm and realizing his physical state had been significantly enhanced, the beast core had strengthened him far beyond his expectations. So he walked over to pick up the crossbow while the security team scrambled to carry Zhang Shui away in the background. "He's a monster, run for your lives," cried the guards, while the one who had stood confidently before Yan Hao earlier changed his attitude and patted his shoulder, calling him Brother Yan. "You were like a god of war just now," the guard praised, and Yan Hao was slightly surprised by his sudden change in attitude, asking if he was all right, to which the man replied quickly, "I'm fine, I can take a hit," the guard said as Yan Hao walked over to Captain Gu and returned the crossbow, receiving a word of thanks from the captain. He smiled and said there was no need for thanks, as Captain Gu had always helped him in the past, so it was only natural for him to protect the captain now. Captain Gu expressed his concern about the city defense team coming to cause trouble, but before he could finish his sentence, the guard beside them spoke up quickly. "Don't worry, Captain. Yan Hao and I are with the Special Task Force now, so the defense team won't dare touch us," the guard said, and after finishing his paperwork at the Kai-He city base, Yan Hao went to report to Song-Er. Song-Er held his assessment form and told him his application had been sent to headquarters, handing the approved document to Yan Hao and noting that the main office had cleared it, which left him impressed. "That's quite efficient," he remarked happily while taking the notice, asking if he was now an official member of the Special Task Force, but Song-Er immediately shot him down. "Don't celebrate just yet, Yan Hao, because the real challenge is about to begin," she said, explaining that he had to leave for the Hu Cheng headquarters immediately for the blood soldier selection trials. "But I believe that with your skills, you will surely pass with ease," Song-Er said, and Yan Hao gave a confident smile as he raised his hand and cracked his knuckles. "I get it, just watch me break the record," he replied, and soon military vehicles along with a transport truck were seen entering the city of Hu Cheng. Inside the vehicle, Song-Er held the briefing board and gave the new recruits a short introduction, explaining that Hu Cheng was the capital of Su and the headquarters for the blood soldiers. Yan Hao sat in the back, pointing at the guard who was lazily enjoying the scenery, and remarked that he heard official blood soldier members must be at least D-rank warriors. "How are these warrior ranks evaluated? Can someone this week really take the blood soldier exam?" Hearing this, the guard scratched his head with an awkward laugh, saying his only strength was his durability. Song-Er then began to explain in detail. "He belongs to the logistics team, not the combat unit, so he doesn't need to participate in the combat trials." Upon hearing this, the man across from him immediately regained his confidence, patted his shoulder, and laughed loudly. "The logistics team will also accompany you on the battlefield, so you'll be needing me a lot later on. Haha, since we have some free time, let's exchange some information. People like me, who can activate special abilities, are collectively known as warriors. Their combat power is classified into 6 ranks from highest to lowest: S, A, B, C, D, and E. The Special Response Team has its own evaluation system, based on each individual's physical strength and stamina. Meanwhile, mutated beasts are ranked from weakest to strongest as Scout, Vicious Hound, Overlord, Behemoth, and Calamity. Comparing the ranks, an E-rank warrior can defeat a Scout-level beast. Similarly, a D-rank warrior is equivalent to a Vicious Hound-level beast, while B and C-rank warriors are on par with Overlord-level beasts. An A-rank warrior is equivalent to a Behemoth-level beast, and an S-rank warrior can face off against a Calamity-level beast. Additionally, crystal core compatibility significantly affects one's rank. During this, Yan Hao seriously asked about crystal core compatibility. Song-Er explained that in this apocalyptic world, only beasts mutated by the red mist possess special abilities. We human warriors must rely on crystal core weapons that are compatible with the beast's cores. To utilize these abilities, one's physique, talent, and even luck influence the compatibility level. The higher the compatibility, the greater the quality and quantity of abilities that can be activated. Without compatibility, you can only reach E-rank. Later, as Song-Er's military convoy was moving, they were stopped by an armed officer. "Apologies, this route is currently cordoned off. Please take another way." A driver in front questioned how they dared to block the special response team. The nearby soldiers explained that they were simply carrying out orders and had no choice. Seeing the distinctive Lu Deng logo on a vehicle passing through the blockade, Song-Er had an ominous feeling. Why would a massive corporation like Lu Deng appear at the blood soldier selection exam? Something isn't right. An hour later, at the blood soldier recruitment testing grounds, the judges stood before the candidates and announced that the blood soldiers were humanity's strongest support and the sharpest blade of the special response team. Chief Judge and A-rank warrior Lin Yongson stood with his hands behind his back and solemnly declared, "I don't care about your backgrounds. Once you're here, you must follow the rules. Pulling strings is strictly forbidden, even if you're the president's own grandson. Without real ability, don't dream of staying in my blood soldier unit." He then raised his hand and announced the start of the examination. The first part, the physical fitness test, begins now. The first physical test involved carrying a 50 kg weight while sprinting 100 meters. In this segment, Yan Hao far outpaced his competitors, setting a record with a time of 5.1 seconds. Next was the electronic strength test to measure arm power. While an average person could only lift a 100-kilogram weight with one hand, Yan Hao effortlessly hoisted 500 kg as if it were a mere pebble, leaving everyone around him in shock. He actually lifted 500 kg with one hand. During the punching power test, he didn't use his full strength for fear of breaking the machine. A moderate punch dented the machine, causing sparks and smoke to fly, leaving the examiner speechless as the broken power meter failed to provide a reading. 10 minutes later, Yan Hao stood before the chief examiner with his hands behind his back and reported that he had finished all the required tasks. Lin Yongxin held the notification board in surprise, confirming his completion with 198 points as the surrounding crowd began to buzz with excitement. The previous record for a recruit was only 180 points, prompting a dissatisfied man to step forward and question if he was cheating. Instructor Lin, the highest record for a recruit joining the team was 140 points, yet his score is far beyond that. I simply do not believe this. That was Zhang Jin, the younger brother of Zhang Shui and the captain of the Qixi City Defense Force, whom Lin Yongxin looked at with annoyance. I supervised this personally and there are security cameras. Are you suggesting I gave him special treatment? Lin asked as Zhang Jin smirked and glared at Yan Hao. I wouldn't dare, I'm just curious, he said, stepping behind him and asking if he was Yan Hao from the Qixi City Patrol. Yan Hao wondered about this menacing stranger who smirked like a villain and said he was just greeting a fellow townsman before he met his end. He suppressed his fury while recalling the humiliation his brother had suffered, thinking that the brat should wait because he would pay him back tenfold. Hao grew more suspicious as he watched the stranger's unfamiliar back, wondering how they could be from the same town when he knew nothing of the man. Lin Yongxin stood across from him and explained that the man was Zhang Jin, the young master of the Qixi Defense Force, asking if they were acquainted. We aren't, he replied, though he now understood that the man wanted to avenge Zhang Shui, whom he had previously thrashed. Those Defense Force members were rotten to the core as Lin Yongxin announced the results. 30th was Zhang San with 89 points, and third was Zhang Jin with 123 points. Second place was Jin Ying with 135 points, and first was Yan Hao with 198, while a beautiful blonde girl gazed at his strong back like a devoted fan. She had only joined the assessment for fun, and found it fascinating that such a capable recruit appeared, deciding she had to study him thoroughly. That was Jin Ying, the runner-up and a senior researcher at the Technical Intelligence Bureau, as Lin Yongxin stated that only the top 15 would remain. The next phase was the Crystal Core Compatibility Test. While in his private room, Zhang Jin complained over a tablet about how he should have been first. A voice came from the tablet marked with the Lu Deng symbol, asking if he would even be qualified for the exam if his brother wasn't acting as a dog for Lu Deng. Zhang Jin scowled and ground his teeth at the mention of the two monsters, while the men on the screen crossing their legs and smoking told him he had one last chance. He clenched his fists, his expression darkening. For his brother's sake, he was determined to join the Blood Soldiers. Inside the Essence Core testing room, 15 candidates who passed the first round stood at attention, awaiting their turn. Lin Yongxin, holding a bracelet device, announced that the test was straightforward. They simply needed to wear the bracelet and place the Essence Core against their wrist. We will assess your compatibility with the Essence Core, and anyone below 40% will be disqualified immediately. For those unaware, I shall briefly explain what an Essence Core is. Images of various Essence Cores appeared on both sides of Lin Yongxin as he continued, explaining that only beasts above the Hound level produce these cores, and the stronger the beast, the higher the core's quality. By embedding these cores into beast armaments, warriors can wield supernatural abilities similar to those of the monsters. Everyone possesses a unique compatibility with these cores, which awakens their innate talents across three primary attributes: elemental, strength, and support control. This wrist guard is the lowest grade, designed only to test compatibility without granting special abilities. However, once you join the Blood Soldiers combat unit, you will be provided with superior Essence Cores and equipment. Having finished his explanation, Lin Yongxin declared the start of the Essence Core compatibility test. The first candidate underwent the test, and the screen displayed a D rank with a 39% compatibility rate, failing by a mere 1%. He collapsed to his knees, screaming in anguish that he ranked 5th in physical strength, and wondered why this test was harder than slaying beasts. But his cries were ignored as the second candidate achieved a D rank with 56% compatibility. I passed. I can join the Blood Soldiers now, he cheered, before Lin Yongxin suddenly spoke in a cold voice, announcing that it was now Zhang Jin's turn. His eyes were bloodshot, and his face appeared years older, as if he had used stimulants. He stepped forward with a cold snort and equipped the wrist guard. He snatched the essence core and slammed it into the guard with sheer aggression, gritting his teeth as he muttered a threat for it to obey him. A D-rank with 60% compatibility appeared on the display, causing the surrounding crowd to murmur in awe, as the strongest person in the previous group had only reached 56%. He must be the strongest one this time, they whispered, while Zhang Jin stared at the result with a smug grin, thinking that he was the elite among a pile of trash. As he stepped down, the whispers continued, with Ding Ding asserting that Zhang Jin was undoubtedly the most powerful candidate this time. Jin Hong approached, his curious gaze fixed intently on Yan Hao, asking if he truly came from Kishi City and why he had never heard of someone so powerful before. I am supposed to be an all-knowing member of the Technical Intelligence Bureau, yet you managed to evade my notice. You are certainly not ordinary, he remarked. The abnormal fluctuations in the red mist concentration at Kishi City a few days ago might even be related to you, he suggested. And upon hearing mention of the Intelligence Bureau, Yan Hao immediately averted his gaze as a bead of sweat rolled down his forehead, trying to deflect by asking what he meant and claiming to have no idea. Jin Ying crossed her arms and sneered, saying it did not matter if he admitted it since she was interested in him anyway, while Yan Hao realized he could use her and turned to ask a question. He asked if she could help him find information on someone since she seemed to know everything, to which Jin Ying raised a finger and gave a challenging wink, agreeing to the request. However, she set a condition while pointing at the core compatibility tester, stating that if his score surpassed hers, she would provide him with any information he desired without any strings attached. She promised that anything was possible, just as Lin Yongxin called out for Jin Ying to go next, prompting her to rush forward while waving her hand. Shouting that she was coming, Jin Ying stood before the machine with her hands on her hips and confidently declared that everyone should watch closely as she broke Zhang Jin's record. Below the stage, Yan Hao wondered if she was truly as powerful as her confidence suggested, while Zhang Jin watched with a disdainful look, muttering about her showing off as she donned her armor and spun the core. She slotted the core into her armor with the flair of a transforming superhero and gave a confident smile, telling everyone to watch as the screen displayed a grade D rank with 78% compatibility. The crowd immediately erupted into a frenzy because a grade D warrior with 78% compatibility was unheard of, leading many to believe the machine was malfunctioning. Jin Ying flashed a thumbs up and a bright idol-like smile before walking down and taunting Zhang Jin by making V-signs right in front of his face. After she bragged about breaking his record, Zhang Jin clenched his fists with eyes full of hatred, thinking that he could not let this foolish girl off any easier than Yan Hao. Lin Yongxin then announced that the final participant was Yan Hao, who began to make his way up to the stage. He realized her strength was genuine, and she likely wasn't lying about her vast knowledge, just as Jin Ying turned her challenging gaze toward him to ask if he was feeling the pressure. Yan Hao stepped forward with one hand in his pocket and pointed toward the sky with an air of total confidence, telling her to watch closely as he looked at the core in his hand. Determined to win the bet to find clues about Xiao Zhu, he inserted the core into his gauntlet and waited to see his compatibility, leaving the crowd speechless when the screen displayed a grade C rank. This was the first time a grade C result had ever appeared during the test, but the system suddenly began to repeat a startling announcement. The repeated warnings of a detected error caused the crowd to murmur in confusion as every eye turned toward the display board. Since this was the first time they had witnessed a system failure, everyone wondered about the compatibility score until the announcement continued with an even more unusual tone during the check. The system reported 0% compatibility, leaving Yan Hao standing there frozen and muttering to himself, while Zhang Jin pointed at him and laughed hysterically, calling him a piece of trash. Zhang Jin mocked him for acting so superior only to be rejected by the core itself, prompting Yan Hao to narrow his eyes and glare back with a cold, piercing gaze. Just as he identified his next target for a lesson, he felt something strange on his gauntlet and looked down to see the core dissolving into a red mist that was being absorbed into his arm. This is bad. My body is forcibly absorbing this crystal core, he thought as he gritted his teeth to maintain control, terrified his secret might be revealed. Before he could react, Jin Ying rushed to the control panel and saw a 0% compatibility rate, an anomaly that had never occurred before. Even the lowest result should be at least 1%, she muttered, appearing like a mad scientist as she laughed and typed frantically on the console. I have to record this event because my old man will definitely be fascinated, she thought, while Zhang Jin noticed something and let a cruel smile spread across his face. Hey, where did the crystal core on that bastard's hand go? He shouted while pointing at Yan Hao, reporting to the instructor that Yan Hao had stolen the core. The crystal core on his hand has vanished. and upon hearing this, Lin Yongxin was startled and immediately ordered Yan Hao to raise his hand and show his wrist guard. He raised his arm to find the crystal core had vanished from the wrist guard, prompting a stern Lin Yongxin to demand its immediate return as Yan Hao felt the mounting pressure. Standing there stunned and stammering that he didn't know why it disappeared, he sighed and realized he needed an explanation quickly to avoid becoming a lab rat. A plan quickly formed in his mind, and he decided to gamble by pretending it was a beastification ability to see if the crystal core would activate. A red mist emanated from Yan Hao's hand as his arm began to mutate before everyone, shocking Zhang Jin and prompting Lin Yongxin to grip his weapon and order everyone to fall back. In contrast to the others' wariness, Jin Ying was incredibly excited, her eyes sparkling and her face flushing as she held her cheeks in anticipation. Oh my, could this be beastification? She wondered, while Zhang Jin curiously asked if the man had been contaminated by the red mist as Lin Yongxin remained ready to strike. Everyone stand back and watch his every move, for we may have to eliminate him here, Lin Yongxin warned, just as Jin Ying raised her hand and called out to Yan Hao. Can you hear me? She asked, to which he calmly replied by asking what was wrong, leaving Lin Yongxin to wonder if he had managed to retain his sanity. Yan Hao remained composed as he slowly reversed the mutation on his arm, explaining that the crystal core seemed to have entered his body and granted him this power. Jin Ying excitedly rushed over to grab his arm, amazed that he kept his consciousness and wondering if this was a transformation ability, while a relieved Lin Yongxin sheathed his weapon. Retaining one's sanity after beastification is certainly a rare talent, Lin Yongxin remarked, while Yan Hao looked at Jin Ying with a gaze full of suspicion. Who exactly are you, and how do you know so much? He asked, while Jin Ying continued to hold his arm tightly as if afraid her test subject might escape. She released his arm and gave him a charming wink and a bright smile to capture his attention, playfully reminding him that she knew everything. Lin Yongxin stepped forward and patted Jin Ying on the head, revealing that she was not only a candidate for this exam, but also a senior researcher at the Technical Intelligence Bureau. Her father is Major General Jin Ancheng, who is in charge of the entire Technical Research and Development Department. Jin Ying pouted, her fists clenched and her face flushing red as she complained that Instructor Lin had revealed her secret, ruining her mysterious image. Yang Xin chuckled softly. All right, let's end the commotion here, he said. Yan Hao was ordered to hand over the essence crystal, but he could only scratch his head awkwardly and reply, Instructor Lin, I can't give it to you. It has already merged with my body, he explained, pointing to his wrist guard and adding that it remained inside him and refused to come out. Zhang Jin, standing behind him, witnessed the exchange between Yan Hao and Yang Xin and muttered to himself, wondering if the crystal had truly entered the boy's body. Amidst the buzzing crowd discussing the strange event, Zhang Jin hid his scheming expression with one hand, thinking he must inform Lu Deng's people immediately. This man would surely be a magnificent test subject. Sometime later, Yan Hao was taken to the radiation room for a physical examination. The researchers were diligently analyzing his vitals when one of them exclaimed that he had never seen anything like it before. He questioned how an essence crystal could possibly exist inside a human body. Another researcher agreed, noting that it appeared to have completely integrated into his system. He feared it might be impossible to extract. He turned to ask Director Jin for his thoughts. Jin Ying, who was eagerly waiting to uncover the secrets within Yan Hao's body, also listened intently. Director Jin stroked his beard with a curious gaze, remarking that the boy was worth studying and certainly held many secrets. He was Jin Ancheng, the deputy director of the Technical Intelligence Bureau and Jin Ying's father. Yang Xin and a well-dressed man entered, asking the director about the current situation. He inquired about what was so special about the boy's body. Jin Ancheng teased him, asking if Si Zhu still maintained that rigid rule of rejecting anyone with less than 40% compatibility. Song Lion, the chief of staff of the Special Forces and Song Er's father, stepped forward and told old Jin to stop beating around the bush and explain what was happening. Jin Ancheng looked at the data sheet, noting that since he and Lu Deng had developed the testing equipment together, he understood it better than anyone. This wasn't about percentages. Jin Ying, unable to contain her patience, shook her father's arm and urged him to speak quickly, desperate to know what was so unique about the boy's body. Jin Ancheng laughed like a mad scientist, explaining that the boy's body exceeded the machine's testing range, as his compatibility far surpassed the theoretical maximum he had set, reaching a full 100%. Upon hearing this, Song Lion's expression turned grave, his brow furrowing as if he had just received news of vital importance to the nation's future. He turned to leave, ordering Yang Xin to follow him immediately. Yang Xin immediately replied, "Yes, sir." Inside the scanner, Yan Hao felt the essence crystal within his body shifting from black to red. He smiled with satisfaction, wondering if it was because he had absorbed that small essence crystal. Previously, he had consumed the core of an overlord-class beast, stealing its ability and activating the crystal inside him. This time, although he gained no new powers from the low-level crystal, his own essence crystal had been strengthened. This meant that the stronger the beast, the more powerful he would become after absorption. By continuously consuming beast crystals, he could evolve indefinitely. At the Sea headquarters, Song questioned Song Lion, asking if there was any issue with Yan Hao joining her team since she was the one who brought him in. Song Lion replied coldly, "First Lieutenant Song mind your status and the way you speak. Furthermore, aren't you showing far too much interest in that C-rank recruit?" Song tried to explain, "Father, I promised to bring him into my squad. You cannot force me to become a soldier who breaks her word." Song Lion clasped his hands behind his back, preparing to depart. "A soldier's integrity is for the nation, not an individual. Yan Hao has already joined Lin Yongxin's team. This is final." He turned back with a cold gaze. "As a squad leader of Shizu, do you really intend to fight him for a recruit? Return to your post immediately. This is an order." Song had no choice but to comply, but she secretly thought she would have to find another way. At the Shizu barracks lounge, Jin Huang shouted loudly, Yan Hao, I have some breaking news." She ran over with a smile to announce that the newly discovered monster nest between Hu City and Kishi City would be explored by the Shizu recruits. "I have already asked Instructor Lin to let us form a team." This revelation left him feeling somewhat surprised. Captain Yang Xin eventually issued their orders, stating the mission objective was to scout and evaluate the threat level while remaining vigilant despite it being a low-level monster den. However, things could change due to the red mist. Jin Ying spoke with total confidence, claiming data collection was her forte and promising to look after him. Despite her big talk, she was only D-rank, lower than his C-rank. As the convoy moved quickly, Jin Ying explained that monster nest threat levels were divided into 4 categories: low, medium, high, and extreme. There were also many different types. The low-level nest they were heading toward was a hive type, characterized by a simple structure but a complex internal tunnel system. The worst part, she whispered in his ear, was the stinging swarm consisting of numerous worker bees and a few soldier bees, while he sat lost in thought. He wondered why a single hive required 3 vehicles, prompting Jin Ying to laugh at the newcomer, noting these were no ordinary honeybees. Upon arrival, he broke into a cold sweat looking at the sky, realizing how massive they were. The assistant yelled for everyone to hold on during a sharp turn as a barrage of stingers flew at them, which Jin Ying identified as iron stingers. Their armored vehicle wouldn't hold, so Yan Hao decided to handle them while testing his new technique. He used his mutation to coat the car door for defense before leaping out with mutated hands, swiftly taking them down. The driver was stunned by his immense power, while Jin Ying explained that she initially thought he could only transform his own body. Seeing him coat the vehicle proved his strength, and she excitedly noted that he could turn anything into a weapon. It was so incredible that she felt compelled to record his combat data for thorough research later. While he fought, a green light suddenly pierced through his defense effortlessly, making him realize he needed to find the source of such danger. Yan Hao turned back and shouted that a hidden enemy was attacking, warning everyone to find cover immediately. They quickly ducked behind a large boulder. Meanwhile, a man in protective gear rushed forward to burn the swarm, but a green projectile struck his fuel tank in an instant. With a loud boom, he was sent to meet his maker. Yan Hao shouted to Jin Ying, asking where those sharp green spikes were coming from. She checked her data and identified it as a hound-class queen bee, whose stinger contained venom capable of corroding armor below C-rank. He was shocked to find a hound class there, realizing the intel was wrong, and this wasn't a low-level nest. He proposed a plan to take down the queen while they held off the swarm. Jin Ying immediately unleashed her wind ability, firing a gale blast forward. In an instant, the swarm was pushed back, clearing a path for Yan Hao to charge. The queen bee was massive, her blood-red eyes looking ready to tear him apart. Yan Hao used his strength to twist the car door into a long rod and then shaped it into a steel spear. It was a truly surreal sight as he stepped back, cracking the ground and threw the spear with all his might. The spear flew like a bullet and pierced the queen's body, yet she showed no reaction. As he wondered why it was so strong, Jin Ying rushed over, shouting for him not to let it escape as it was about to evolve into an overlord, but he had already collapsed from exhaustion. He thought to himself that without the red mist to replenish him, his energy had vanished in an instant. Had he known, he would have saved some to finish off the queen. She walked over and stood with her hands on her hips, letting him admire the view as she asked if he was about to die. and if he needed her to give him mouth-to-mouth. Yan Hao sat up abruptly and claimed he had no interest in children, which left her feeling quite bitter. She wondered how he could complain when she was clearly so well developed. It was a hopeless situation. She offered him a chocolate bar, but since he wasn't hungry, she ended up eating it herself. They decided to report the situation to their superiors and request reinforcements. After measuring the blood mist concentration in the cave, Jin Ying decided to venture further inside. With the queen bee injured, this was their chance to achieve something great. Meanwhile, at headquarters, Captain Yang received an urgent report that left him in a state of panic. The danger level of the bee nest had escalated, and Yan Hao and Jin Ying had already charged inside. The old man spoke up, telling him to stay calm, noting that while Jin Ying was usually arrogant, she was also very cautious and wouldn't take such a risk without being certain. He ordered the immediate deployment of the nearest blood chi unit for rescue. The primary objective was the safety of Jin Ying and Yan Hao, while the secondary goal was to destroy the monster nest. At that moment, Yang Zhai's team also left the hospital to head there. Song Er's father stated he would have his younger brother accompany her, asking if there were any issues. It turned out he was the one who had arranged for a bodyguard to protect his daughter. He appeared stern on the outside. She remained the pride and joy of his heart. Back inside the nest, the two of them were advancing while wearing anti-mist combat suits. As members of the Blood Chi, only the two of them possessed such equipment. Jin Ying reported that while energy levels hadn't shifted much, the queen bee had recently evolved into an overlord-class monster. The difficulty of conquering the nest was about to skyrocket. Sensing something, he told her to stop as the queen bee lunged out to protect its home, its body even larger than before. They realized it had successfully ascended to an overlord-rank iron-armored poison queen bee. Everything was going wrong, and Jin Ying lamented the situation. The low concentration of red mist shouldn't have been enough to support such a rapid evolution. Not only that, but the worker bees had also been strengthened. Clutching her device, she screamed, wondering why the cursed machine hadn't warned them that the blood mist concentration had already exceeded the danger threshold. She slumped to the ground in a state of helplessness. It turned out their protective suits had been tampered with, weakening their defense against the blood mist. There was a traitor within the blood chi. Countless iron stingers suddenly shot toward them, forcing them to retreat. As he ran, he thought to himself that since he needed blood mist anyway, they were essentially delivering it right to him. However, he first needed to ensure Jin Ying's safety, as he couldn't fight properly with her in the middle of this formation. He quickly found a small crevice, hid her behind some rocks, and instructed her to stay there, promising she could hold out for a while. He told her he would go deal with them. Before he left, she shouted that if he didn't return, she would never forgive him, even in the afterlife. He responded with a confident stride, telling her not to worry as he would definitely return. In a short time, Yan Hao had absorbed enough blood mist and was ready to go all out. He decided to use the energy cannon he had previously obtained from the Overlord boss, knowing a single shot would drain all his strength, so he absolutely could not fail. He concentrated his power into the red energy sphere in his hand and hurled it, unleashing a crimson condensation blast that shook the earth and tore a hole through the entire nest. He thought he had succeeded, but the red mist persisted and the bees remained unharmed, leaving him bewildered. 3 minutes earlier, Jin Ying had been repairing the blood mist measurement device. Once it was finally fixed, it immediately alerted her that the red mist concentration had reached a dangerous level, twice the warning threshold. A sudden tremor then sent a wave of fear through her. Gazing up at a massive hole, she wondered if an external explosion had occurred and why the blast had intensified the red mist. From her hiding spot in the crevice, she realized that these bee swarms were evolving quickly by absorbing high concentrations of the mist. Even the lowest scouts had evolved into hound-class entities. Engaging in battle, he noticed a shift. The enemies were growing more numerous and powerful, and despite the red mist around him, his recovery rate couldn't match his energy depletion. Things would end badly if this continued, a fact Jin Ying also recognized. She spotted signs of red mist corruption appearing on Yan Hao's neck. With the red mist thickening, he was at risk of losing control. She quickly deployed her wind pressure bullets to disperse the mist swirling around him. She hurled a wind sphere, making it rotate to clear the red mist away from Yan Hao. He groaned, thinking his teammate was actually hindering him since he now had no way to replenish his energy. The bees launched venomous stingers at him, and though he used his arms to block, the resulting paralysis was frustrating. As another swarm attacked from the rear, he found himself unable to evade until someone suddenly stepped in to take the hit for him. It was Adjutant Lin Lin, a C-rank strength-type user. Her basic ability was body fortification, with derivative skills including petrification, super sensing, and beast core source. "That stings, boss," he remarked, reminding him to stay focused as the battle was far from over. Just as another swarm closed in, they were struck down by purple projectiles fired by the C-Rank Song-er. Having received orders from headquarters, she had arrived to provide reinforcements and immediately commanded an all-out assault. As the teams used fire to incinerate the swarm, Yan Hao and the vice captain stepped back to recover. Suddenly, the boss launched an attack at them, but Captain Song intercepted it with lightning bullets, paralyzing the creature. As it attempted to flee upward, he couldn't help but admire the impressive strength of his main wife. The vice captain noted that she hadn't been equipped with her combat gear during their previous encounter. Taking advantage of the distraction, he moved aside to absorb the red mist and restore his energy. Everyone suddenly shouted a warning as they realized the boss was absorbing all the local red mist to evolve. Someone exclaimed in shock that it shouldn't be possible, as the creature had only just reached the Overlord rank. As the swarm intensified, he shouted that he had a plan to take down the boss and charged forward. Moving with blinding speed, he evaded strikes while landing blows that barely affected the creature, making Yan Hao realize that fighting empty-handed was futile. He unleashed a blood explosion sphere, yet it failed to leave a mark, and he narrowly avoided a lethal stinger to the head. Yan Hao knew he desperately needed a weapon. Scanning his surroundings, he decided the Queen Bee's stinger would make a suitable weapon. He quickly mutated it into a blade and lunged forward, putting all his might into a crimson blood rain slash. With a thunderous impact, the boss was finally slain. He snatched the falling essence crystal, but his body absorbed it instantly, causing him agonizing pain. The others watched in concern, unsure of what was happening to him. He was simply absorbing the loot. This concludes part 1. Don't forget to leave a like for the channel.